She's a real woman with a real life. She's someone you can relate to. Dawn Newton.
You don't know me. You don't know me. I can hold fire in my hand, call the rain and ride the wind.
Welcome to the Dawn Newton Podcast. I am your host, Dawn Newton. My guest today is best-selling author Janet Skeslien Charles. She took the world by storm in 2021 with the publication of the instant bestseller, The Paris Library. Following up The Paris Library is a highly anticipated The Parisian Chapter, a charming and cinematic multicast audiobook about a young woman from Montana who lands a job in the American Library in Paris, where she discovers the power of storytelling and writes her own Parisian chapter. Hi, Janet. How are you?
Hi, Dawn. Thank you so much. I'm doing great. I hope you are too.
I am. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I love this work, and I love your story, and of course the stories that you write. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, I'm the one that's thanking you. I'm excited to talk to you.
Congratulations on this work. You know, you're the author of The Paris Library, which was a huge success, instant bestseller. I want to see it come to film or streaming or something. It's amazing. And then now the highly anticipated, as I've been reading about, The Parisian Chapter. What a journey you have been on, just your life, but then also bringing it to life in the pages. I mean, there's so much of you in the book, at least the way I see. Phenomenal work. Thank you for doing this. It provides us an amazing escape, at least for me it has.
Well, thank you for your kind words. You know, you called it a success, but it wasn't always so successful. It was the Paris Library was rejected by my original editor and my original agent. So I started over and queried 75 other agents before I found my current agent, Heather Jackson. She pitched it to editors. So it's just one of those things where you just have to be relentless and really believe in the story that you're telling. It takes the time that it takes, but you just never know how these things will go. So I'm just always so grateful when someone tells me that they enjoyed the book. It makes me glad that I persevered.
Well, and that's one thing that's really interesting. And I've interviewed so many authors, and that's always one of the questions I ask is, how many no's did you get before you got that yes? Because I know some of those no's enter into not only double digits, but triple digits, and they keep persevering. And that in and of itself is interesting, because most people one no and they would drop it and go a different direction. But that's one thing I admire about authors, is where that fortitude comes from, the belief, the passion in what you do. And then, of course, I always wonder, for all those ones that gave you a no, do they ever come back and beg forgiveness and ask for your word?
Honestly, you know, my friend, even my French editor rejected this book, and I just, the way I feel about it is, it takes so much to bring a book into the world, and, you know, editors get rejected, publicists and get rejected too. So anyone in publishing is facing a lot of rejection and hard times. And so you really have to love a project to spend 18 months to 2 years with it, to edit it, to bring it through, you know, copy editing, and then all of the marketing and publicity. So it has to really be a labor of love. So I would never want anyone to feel bad because they rejected it, because I know their passion will be for another project.
And the fortitude that you had too, I think, is very admirable. That's one thing I always encourage people. If you're ever questioning or doubting, or if you need that oomph to keep going, research authors. I think they're a great inspiration and a testament to that.
I had a book called How I Got Published, and I think it was a collection of essays of probably 20 different authors. And that book, I read that book so often for inspiration that the spine actually fell apart, because it just, you know, it meant so much to me that those other writers shared their ups and downs and their rejections and what they went through. It helped me continue.
Let's talk about these wonderful books that you've written. The Paris Library, that was in 2021, and then now we have, as a highly anticipated The Parisian Chapter. Tell us about these books, the Paris Library and then the Parisian chapter?
When I talk about the Paris Library, I always say it's World War II, Paris is occupied, there's a war on words, and it's Nazis versus librarians, and the librarians win. And so it's this story of this amazing little library, the American Library in Paris, that resisted against the Nazis and even the Gestapo who came to the library in order to hand-deliver books to their Jewish readers. And so already you see that fortitude. The real-life head librarian, Dorothy Reeder, who was so brave, the American ambassador, told American residents in France in the summer of 1939 and in the spring of 1940, go home. It's dangerous here, go home. And the librarian stayed. I think if the ambassador told me to go, I would go. So just speaking of fortitude and that courage to see something through, these real-life librarians were amazing. And so I wanted to continue that story of the American Library in Paris, where I worked from 2010 to 2012. I coordinated evening events. So every week, the library invited art historians, journalists, authors, and I had that front row seat of all of these amazing people and the drama, heartache, homesickness, frustration, hope, and happiness that people felt. And so the place really is a novel.
Well, and it's just, a front row seat to all of that, and then just the history, and then being in Paris, which is, just hearing that just sounds so romantic, although I know there's not always, of course. And then introduce us to Lily. She, her story is not quite over. I'm just curious how many books there's going to be in the Parisian series. But Lily's story it doesn't seem like her story is ever going to be over.
Well, it's just, as you say, Paris seems so romantic. And it's kind of a paradox because it is the romance capital of the world for a lot of people. But also per capita, it is the city where more people live alone. So I think that really defines very well what Paris is, with all of these different paradoxes that we can find. And so we find Lily, and she's past her honeymoon phase. She's visited the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower and gorged on all these pastries and cheese and wine. And she's, in her 20s. And I think for me, my 20s were a really hard time. All the doors were open and there were so many choices that it was actually overwhelming. And so this is Lily, where she's got a job at the American Library in Paris, but she's low man on the totem pole, and she has all these great ideas, but no one's really taking her seriously. And if she's not hearing back from her very dear best friend, and she doesn't understand why. So there are a lot of questions with the backdrop of the American Library in Paris and the city of Paris itself. But I think the book is for anyone who's searching for answers, who's reinventing themselves, who really just wants to have their dream come true and is willing to work hard to make that dream come true. So that's what I would say the book is for. I think it's a standalone book for anyone who dreams.
And how much we see as I'm reading through the book and listening to the audiobook and then just researching you for our discussion, Janet and Lily to me are one and the same. I'm sure there's so many differences, but just the backdrop coming from Montana. I've read that you started writing this book or coming into your mind around when you were 10 years old.
Well, I lived a few doors down from a war bride in Shelby, Montana. She was one of the few signs of the outside world, and I didn't know her very well, but I just loved how everything she said sounded better because of her beautiful French accent, and it sounded so important when she spoke and so beautiful. So yes, I definitely was very interested in France. I think about my grandma who did jigsaw puzzles, and so she had all of these French chateaus. She had Dutch tulip fields. So already when I was a child, I was already very attuned to the outside world through these snapshots. I remember going to the library and reading about Marie Curie, who traveled from Poland to France. So already in the back of my mind, I think as a child, I was already very excited about visiting the whole world.
Who are these books for?
I think these books are for anyone. My ideal reader was my Aunt Anna, who always really stayed local, and she didn't travel much. And so I would really love it for, of course, I want people who have been to Paris to enjoy another Parisian chapter and read my book and maybe remember the streets they walked down or the time they went to the library or those desserts they ate. But I also hope it's for people who haven't had that opportunity, and I hope it will make them dream about a future Parisian chapter, where maybe they can have a little visit to someplace special that they'd like to visit one day. Maybe not Paris, but someplace they'd like to go.
I do share a huge love of books. I love to hold a book in my hand. The mustier, smellier it is, and the older it is, the better for me.
I'm like you. I'm like you.
I love bookstores. I love libraries. And sometimes I wonder, because we have all the technology now where we can listen to them, we can read them online and things like that, if they're ever in danger of going away. But I don't think that is. I don't think that's going to be happening. But sometimes I worry about that. Do you share that concern at all?
Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. Because my library system has Libby and Overdrive, so you can get those books online. You know, my sister is actually a bigger reader than I am. She commutes an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening from her farm to town where she teaches. And so she reads 2 hours a day thanks to audiobooks. So I think it gives people people who wouldn't necessarily have the time. My sister has 50 chickens, 10 horses. So she doesn't have, she's always doing chores, or she's at work, or she's driving. So the audiobook really lets her read while she's doing the chores, while she's driving to work. So I think it's a real opportunity. And I'm so grateful for this technology that allows us to share our work in any different ways. I have a friend who's dyslexic, so she feels really self-conscious about reading physical books. And then another friend who physically can't hold books anymore, so she uses e-readers. So I'm really grateful that technology has allowed books to adapt to all the different people out there.
And the difference between the end result between paper book, hardcover, to an audiobook, how was that experience? Or, deciding who's going to be the voice, the end product, how involved are you in that?
Simon & Schuster Audio kindly sent me the demo tapes of the folks that they selected, the actors that they selected, and they were all fabulous. And I really, now I feel really bad for casting people for movies, because each person, that they choose to have an audition, they bring something new and different and special. How would you choose? I don't know. I'm glad it wasn't my choice. I loved everybody. And I'm really grateful to Simon & Schuster Audio for doing such an incredible job with the cast.
Because I can only imagine that not only do you visualize what these characters look like, but also what they sound like. And if they hit it and it added up and with what your vision was, that's pretty phenomenal.
It really is. My first book was called Moonlight in Odessa, and it was an audio book as well as a physical book. But the producer gave the character a slight Russian accent because the character was from Eastern Europe. And I found that wasn't really sustainable throughout the whole audio book. So I really like the touches that they have in this book, and of the maybe the French accent, a little bit here, a little bit there. I think it was really well done and really beautiful.
And what do we see in the Parisian chapter? Lily, she takes us on a journey, in her own journey. It's more personal.
Yes, I think so. I think it's a book, I was thinking when I was writing this book, I was thinking back to my 20s, and I found myself anguished all the time in my 20s because I was all the doors were open and it was very exciting. I had just graduated. I'd studied English and then minored in French and Russian, and I wanted to travel, but there were so many destinations, and then where do you work, for how long? And so all those choices, it just was really stressful to me. And so that's what I was thinking about for Lily, as she gets her first job out of college and she and her boss don't quite see eye to eye. And I think when we're young too, and in our first jobs, we really take things to heart in a way that maybe hopefully when we're older, we can have a little more distance and see that things might not necessarily be our fault. It might have to do more with with the other person's point of view and where they're coming from rather than who we are and what we're doing. But I remember in my 20s, I was very sensitive to criticism and took everything to heart. So I was thinking about that kind of person and how she grows and kind of comes into her own and realizes that she can only do the best she can. And as long as she knows she's done her best, then that's what counts.
Is there going to be more, Lily? Are we going to see more of this?
I called it the Parisian chapter because I know Lily moves on and does other things. She doesn't stay in Paris. So for me, that's why it's called the Parisian chapter. This is a time in her life, and then she'll move on.
And you make your home in Paris, am I correct?
I do, yeah. I've been here for 25 years. I came for a year for a teaching position, and then I kept renewing my contract.
That's awesome. I mean, coming from Montana to Paris, and then just the stories that you're telling, it's you provide me, an amazing escape, and I appreciate all of that work.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a joy to write about libraries and the people who inhabit them, and all of the ups and downs, and all of the big questions that are asked in libraries about what we're reading, who we are, how we should fund what matters to us. I just think it's a microcosm of our world.
And then when you're writing, because you started, like I said, you've been writing, and I mean, it seemed like definitely your purpose, your calling, what you were put here to do. Who were your mentors or authors, writers that you admired?
Really, growing up, I just loved Judy Blume. And what I loved about her was that she took so many different points of view, or so many people, and she really put us in their shoes. I mean, whether it was a young woman wondering if God exists, or the changes in her body, the same for a young man. I had a younger sister, and so Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, with the character Peter, who had a younger brother named Fudge. I loved how she put she put readers into the hearts and minds of her characters. Her work is phenomenal. It really is, and it's still, people are still trying to ban her work, which is incredible to me, but she's been so brave throughout the years.
So what's next for you, Janet? What are we going to see coming up?
I'm still promoting my work. I just, the Parisian chapter just came out, and my novel, Miss Morgan's Book Brigade, which was based on a true story of an American librarian who introduced children's libraries to war-torn France during World War I. So I've been really enjoying the promotion of both of these books and reaching out to booksellers and librarians and readers and journalists. Has been absolutely wonderful.
Where can we find your work and learn more about you?
Well, you can find everything you want to know on my website, which is jskeslincharles.com. I also have a newsletter, Skeslien Charles at Substack, and you can find all of the buttons for all the different retailers on my website to get those books.
Well, again, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you. Congratulations on this work, and can't wait to follow and see what comes next.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. It's just been wonderful to talk to you about books.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Dawn Newton podcast, and a special thank you to my guest, Janet Skeslien Charles, joining us today to discuss her highly anticipated The Parisian Chapter. For more information about Janet, please visit jskeslincharles.com and be sure and visit my website, dawnnewton.com. The Dawn Newton podcast is written, produced, and hosted by Dawn Newton.